Hello there. Welcome to the case wrap up for episode 4, April and Kevin. I am joined, as always, by Harrison. Harrison, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So, this week's episode was the first episode where they kind of covered two different people.
Hmm.
There was the death of both April Norton Jones and of Kevin Craig,
Yeah.
and I liked it how it was kind of two episodes in one. I mean, really, the first half was its own episode. The second half was they weren't very like they were interjected
Hmm.
obviously with Boston, but they were both very separate. Had different names involved and everything like that. So let's start off with April. So April was found in her garage, dead, lying between a truck and the side of the wall in a very strange position. And
Hmm.
the coroner in the Oconee Sheriff's Office ruled that it was a accidental overdose.
Hmm.
Kirk does not believe this. From what he said that she had bruises. There were signs of struggle on her hands.
On her
There were
neck.
bruises everywhere. It wouldn't really and on her neck. It really wouldn't make sense to kind of go into your garage and when you got a heated house
Mm.
the next door. Um, there was a bunch of things. So
It's kind of like the Jennifer situation where not enough questions were asked again by the
yes,
police.
I was going to say it's
Hmm.
kind of. I feel like the police saw this, and I believe midway through the episode, they were talking about how there was hot shots going around
Mm.
or something of the matter, and they said, "Oh, would April be someone that?" Because the police said that they went around and they were telling drug addicts and they were telling people who were known users, "Hey, bad shit's going around. Be
Hmm.
very careful of what you are putting into your body now because it could be very lethal." So it sounds to me like the police kind of got there. They saw a known drug user. Apparently, she had been battling drug addiction for
Hmm.
about 10 years there. She was on a bender or a binge, apparently going on for the past 4 days, saw that she was dead. And I think even before they did any testing or, even looked at anything in the room or the situation, they just claimed, oh, must have just been a drug addict who
Yep.
who just OD'd, and there's really no more looking into it
Hmm.
than they did.
Yep.
So
She had a history of it, so that's the story.
exactly,
Same with Jennifer. She's a runaway, so that's what happened. Yeah.
so yeah, so I mean, we're not going to spend resources, especially like I'm sure in Oak County they don't have the resources that let's say Brockton does or
Hmm.
a place up in Boston does. I'm sure they were just like, okay, we're just going to rule this an accidental overdose. Bad stuff's been going around. It's just easier on them to kind of say that
Hmm.
it was
Accidental.
a accidental death.
Hmm.
But so I do want to play devil's advocate here for a second towards Kirk. I know that he said he's not sure that it was accidental. He thinks the investigation should be reopened. I
Hmm.
obviously 100% agree with that. I think there's nothing wrong if they reopen up the investigation and look more into it and kind of look at it from the eye of, okay, what if this wasn't accidental? What if she's wearing these clothes that don't fit her? Her phone was
Hmm.
taken from the scene and all these other things. But so I just wanted to kind of, I'm sure Kirk went over this and stuff, but I just kind of wanted to just from the sheriff's perspective, why they could possibly by assume. So it was said she had bruises. Obviously, Kirk said he did not want to release the
Yeah.
photos um, due to for
Yeah. Just sensitivity
April's
reasons.
family and,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I completely understand that. But meth users are known to scratch like quite a bit. I'd be interested in this is something that like obviously I'm sure Kirk went over, but just like I said, I'm not saying I believe this, but I could see that the sheriff's county said, okay, so the bruises on her were from falling down
Mm-hmm.
or for laying on the ground, and just accidental things. So when you're on meth, obviously you're you don't feel pain. You like to scratch yourself a lot. There could be claw marks on her neck from herself. I'm not entirely sure what would have happened with her hands, but I could see that might be where the sheriffs kind of
Yeah.
pointed to.
Sure,
Um,
I could see that happening, but I would say the like would you get bruises from just scratching? Like would you get harsh bruises around your neck from just scratch
yes,
like
no, I
yeah.
completely agree. I'm just saying that this is what
Mhm.
the sheriff's
Yeah.
county probably would counteract and say, well, this is why we're doing this. This
Mhm.
wasn't like, let's say if you or me was found dead in the garage and we had bruises all over their neck, they would say like, oh well, drug addicts are more likely to get thrown around, kind of it put
Yeah.
in bad situations. And the other point I wanted to make up,
I think the one about her clothes though
yes,
is the most like peculiar piece of information.
yes, I
Um Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I completely agree. I think the fact that she was wearing clothes that were way too big for her
Mhm.
just shows uh, that I don't think she put these clothes on herself. I think that she might have been in such a disoriented state that I think so.
It's not even that it's not even just that she was in weird clothes. It was that like her actual clothes were found like thrown somewhere,
Hmm.
and like she wouldn't have done like there's too many things to do if she was like on meth at the time, which
Yes,
Kirk was getting at.
yes. Um, I know that although also meth users have like a high libido. They're very sexually active. A lot of the times people will trade. I know it was said in the podcast that meth users, they'll trade anything, they'll steal anything, they'll
Mhm.
trade comic books, they'll trade, rare coins for anything for meth. They'll also trade sex. So from what I gathered with Kevin or Boston having to go back, receiving what is assumed to be April's phone and then coming back, it sounds to me like it was a possibility that she was looking for more methamphetamine, and she possibly could have offered sexual favors to Boston uh, for said
Mhm.
for said drugs, and either during the act of maybe when he got there she was dead, and so he tried to make it seem like she was in a different situation, had to go
Mhm.
grab her phone to cover up his tracks, cover up the messages between them, or possibly something went awry where she thought sex could be enough for meth. It wasn't. They got into somewhat of a scuffle. Obviously she had defense marks on her hands, on her neck, and Kevin ended up uh, killing her. And also
Mhm.
another thing I want to say about meth, just because meth is in your system does not necessarily mean that could be the cause of death. It could cause the death. I mean, you could go into cardiac arrest from being in a fight, and then that you normally wouldn't die from if you're not
Mhm.
on methamphetamine. But since you're on methamphetamine, you die from that. So I could definitely see something of that sort happening. But it's
They also said the hypothermia. She was
yep.
cold. Yeah.
Yes. Another thing too is when you're on meth, you actually have a high body temperature. So I'm not necessarily sure she would be feeling the effects of being cold. So I think the whole and also if she was dying of hypothermia, it doesn't make any sense to it. I think it would be kind of hard to tell if someone died of hypothermia if you found them in a garage
Mhm.
days later in the middle of the winter, and in the middle of January.
Yeah.
Uh, it just doesn't make sense, and I could definitely see, because also another thing, not just with the clothes, but with the doors being kind of locked and everything like that, that just does not seem like something
Mhm.
someone who was high on methamphetamine and other drugs could possibly do.
Mhm.
And if that was the case, I think it would be more ruled a suicide than a accidental overdose.
Mhm.
From the sounds of it. So
Well, also, on her kind of locking, or the official report of she was locked in the
mhm,
room, locked in the garage. There was also the contradiction of when she died, based on the official accounts, and her husband, based on when the light was on. He would know when the light was on, and they said she died Sunday, but
mhm,
he left for work and the light was off on Monday.
yep,
So there had to have been that.
there had to have been someone
Yeah.
else who came in, and I think it would just be very coincidental that Kevin Mailer is involved in this and had nothing to do with her death. I mean,
Mhm.
he is a known drug
Dealer.
dealer, and the fact that they're related, I don't think is something to be looked over. So
Mhm.
I do agree with Kirk at the end where he says you should reopen these cases. He gives a list of people who uh, who should be interviewed. It's just crazy that when someone dies like this, the police didn't go through and say, "Hey, listen, um, we're not going to interview her husband, of whom
Mhm.
they've had physical altercations before. We're not going to interview anything. We're just going to say, oh, it's a drug addict. She died overdosing, and that's the end of the story." So
Yep.
it just seems to be kind of like an easy way out
Mhm.
when it all comes down to it.
And even talk to Keisha, who said that she was giving those half truths to
Hmm.
Kirk,
Yep.
about the phone. She said that she sent, April a friend request,
Hmm.
knowing that she was dead, which doesn't line up with any timeline.
Yes. And yeah, that's I mean a very good point. I mean to send April a friend request knowing she was dead before all of this is a story in and of
Mhm.
itself that needs to be investigated.
And Kirk, he said, um, he thinks it's clear why Keisha Smith is kind of hiding some information.
Hmm.
Um, Perhaps that's due to, I don't know. She's scared of Kevin. We know she was scared to talk to Kirk.
Yep.
If she gives out too much information, what's Kevin gonna do?
Yeah, and I mean that's a good segue into Kevin Craig's story. But the last thing I want to say here is, I think it would be interesting if you could look back and look at because it sounds like from what I've seen between Kevin Mailer's Facebook posts is that they do a lot of talking on Facebook through Facebook
Mhm.
Messenger. So I was wondering, is it possible to get access to April's Facebook account and possibly
Mhm.
see if messages were deleted? When was her last correspondence with Kevin Mailer? Because it sounded like when he went back to receive the cell phone that he obviously did some clearing of some things to kind of you know
Mhm.
sully his name. But so that's a good segue into the death of Kevin Craig, who apparently was a good friend of Kevin Mailer, Boston.
Mhm.
His first friend he made when he moved down to South Carolina. So they were very close. Kevin, Boston. I'm going to just refer to Kevin Mailer as Boston here. Boston was seen in what Kirk called Craigville once or twice a week. I believe his brother said he would, he's seen him hundreds of times. He would come and go, come and go. And so Kevin Craig ended up dying in apparently he died from withdrawal, according
Mhm.
to police. And there was no autopsy performed. They did send I believe they said they sent like a piece of tissue away to get tested for drugs, but there was uh, no
Yeah.
autopsy performed. So once again, I think this is just kind of easy, just like kind of taking the easy way out, shitty, police work, just kind of saying, hey, listen, this guy's dead. Once again, he was a known drug user. He died in his home. It's just easier just to say, he just died of withdrawal.
Yeah, I think Carl Addis, when they were talking to him about Kevin Craig, he said that was his call not to do the autopsy, kind of based on the situation that he was found in, where he was once again barricaded like April. He was barricaded in his own room, so they thought like that was kind of clear of what actually happened. They didn't have to do a full thing.
Yes, which I know sometimes when people are trying to, withdraw from drugs, they will barricade themselves in their own rooms and stuff like that. But normally what kind of tipped me off is that there was a syringe next to his body. Normally, if you're trying to withdraw, you wouldn't have access. You would not give yourself, especially if you're so into it that you're barricading yourself in the room, you would not give yourself access to syringes or to drugs. And the fact that apparently Boston, came into the house several times during that weekend and said, oh, nope, Kevin Craig's not here. Meanwhile, when his brother said he came in, he could smell rotting flesh, and apparently his body was starting to be, decomposed by bugs and other sort of nasty stuff. That would definitely be a concern to me if I was a police officer. If I knew that someone came into that house and said, you can't, he's just not in here. Especially if let's say, Harrison, you're going to go look for a friend and you go over their house and there's a door that's barricaded. You can't just be like, oh, well, I guess that door is just locked. You would search the entire house. And that's kind of what his brother did when he had to take the door off the hinges in order to kind of find Kevin Craig. And
they said the official report was there was an empty needle, one empty needle found next to him. And his brother Daniel said it was like covered, like there was a bunch of needles everywhere.
Yes. So once again, it just sounds like it's just shitty police work. Sounds like they probably came in. They probably stereotyped everyone who lives around this area as just a bunch of drug. I'm not saying
they were when they were approaching Craigville, Kirk and Steve, they said the police were concerned for them, like even them going there.
Safety. Yes.
Yeah, for fear of like a gunfight. Happening. Yeah.
So I could see them just trying to get in and out of that place as quickly as possible, or not wanting to open up an investigation because they know that these people are dangerous. Especially when there was, there's always talks of guns going around and everything like that.
Can we mention that it was funny how Steve decided to leave in the when they were going to Craig, the dogs. Kirk wanting the dog to go away.
Yeah. Oh, what did he say? He's like, get in the car. I don't know. What
get it out of the car. Get it out of the car.
Yeah, but that was that I know they've talked in the past, and Kirk was like, there was a vicious dog, and Steve was like, oh no, it was a cute little whatever. I forget what exactly he said it was, but yeah. So I think the biggest takeaway from the Kevin Craig death is at the end with the hidden voice.
Yeah.
When apparently a good friend of Kevin said that when he was driving, he was dropping Kevin off somewhere, and Kevin was having a panic attack. He looked like he was about to throw up, and he kept saying, "They made me do it. They made me do it." He never said who they were, but it is. So that's why I think this person possibly came to, because Boston and Kevin Craig were both very close, so I could see this person kind of reaching out to Boston saying, hey, Kevin's going through something. Apparently he had to do something to Faith, who died. I'm not entirely sure what the cause of it is. And then it's just a coincidence that weeks later he ends up dead. It's that's just something that just doesn't make sense. And I think that if the sheriff's office opened this case back up and did not necessarily rule it an accidental death, if they could interview these people and you could get, this person on record with the police officer saying, this is what Kevin Craig told me. And then you would get Kevin you would get Boston's side of the story.
Mhm.
It's all it's all something that really this episode could honestly be like a season in and of itself.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes
Well,
to
that ending story kind of, you can piece together some of the other episode, like the sound of there was that leaked sound of we'll cut her up and hide, like disperse of the body.
yep.
So if you can connect that with Daniel, Kevin Craig's brother Daniel, saying that he believes that his brother helped hide Faith's body, and then the anonymous source,
Yes.
yeah,
And I'm just saying, not even necessarily indict someone, but just get questions asking. Because I mean, before Kirk went down there, I'm like Kirk said halfway through the episode, he's down here for the disappearance of a 16-year-old girl from Brockton, Massachusetts in 1989. And next thing you know, he's looking into someone who into 3 deaths that happened in the past 3 years, and who knows what else is involved or who else could be involved in this. So I think if police actually put some resources towards this, they spend some time, they could prevent this from happening, because this is still happening. Kevin Craig's death was recent. It doesn't sound like it's was just a mistake or an accidental withdrawal or whatever the actual report says.
The actual report was hyperthermia, hot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know if that I don't know if do you have any information, like would a hot shot like cause that, like
I was trying to look up exactly, like, if there's some sort of untraceable drug you could give someone, which would cause someone to overdose that you really wouldn't be able to catch. I mean, I'm no expert in toxicology or anything like that, but I do think that if they did a full autopsy instead of just sending a sample away to get, because even Steve asks in the interview, it's like, is it possible that the toxicology report missed this, that a full autopsy might have not. So
yeah, based on the decay, like the state, like where they were. Yeah.
Yes, especially because it's not like this was a fresh body. I mean, there was bugs and maggots apparently eating away at the flesh. So I could definitely see why a possible piece of flesh sent away for a toxicology report could be sullied or stuff like that. So so like I said before, I think the anonymous person telling Boston that Kevin's going through a tough time with what he had to do, and I'm not saying Kevin Craig, like, he obviously was not innocent in this entire thing when you look at it, but it just sounds to me like everything is just Kevin putting together, or Boston is just kind of trying to cover his tracks. He's just trying to make it so no one's going to get him in trouble. He's been in trouble with the law before. Sounds to me like this is going ahead towards the end of the episode where he's being interviewed by someone. I don't know if it's a private detective or if it's a police officer or whatever the case was.
That was the tease for episode 5 coming up.
Yes, which sounds very, very interesting. We'll get to that in a second, but I could obviously just see him just not wanting to get involved with this, and just kind of it seems like to be that's Kevin's way of doing things. When he's afraid he's going to get in trouble with something, either he moves across the country or he ties loose ends up by getting rid of someone. There's been too many accidental deaths in and around Boston's area to be kind of just an accident.
I'm not saying that this is what happened, but there's also the possibility that Boston didn't actually kill any of these people, but he finds himself trying to cover himself up, like trying to get away from it, but by doing that he makes himself part of it.
I could definitely see that as a possibility. Obviously he doesn't seem like the brightest man in the world, And obviously he has disdain towards police. So I could see him not wanting to cooperate or anything like that. But I think that about does it in the case of Kevin Craig and
April Norton Jones.
I don't know if you have anything else you want to say.
I guess basically what Kirk has been saying, reopen the case, and do some more digging on this.
Especially because I could see, this is such different than Jennifer Fay's case, which took place in 1989, where apparently that case has been reopened, but it's harder to get witnesses together and, statements from people when it happened, 32 years ago. Meanwhile, these deaths have taken place within the past year or, 2 years. So definitely I encourage, I'm with Kirk 100%, where nothing bad can come out of reopening this case and trying to get more facts together. The only thing that can happen is just more closure for the families and the friends of the people who have lost.
It sounds like things are picking up.
Yes.
There is some movement. There was the largest newspaper in Oconee County did a piece on the podcast
Front page. So I could definitely see the more public pressure that's put, the more, likely it is that this, or hopefully they care. Hopefully they're not just going to say, no matter what, the case is closed, we don't have to do anything else. But so that goes with that. So there was the teaser at the end was very, very interesting. It sounds like it's going to be very, very centered on Boston himself. It sounds like it's going to be this one interview. I believe they said it was like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, 2010 in upstate New York.
So he was questioned about things, and I'm not entirely sure if they said that this was a police.
They said private investigators.
Yes. So a private investigator was talking to Kevin about, I'm going to assume, because at that time, in 2010, the faith thing didn't happen, April didn't happen. So this is probably going to be about the disappearance of Jennifer Fay. And you can definitely see that there's definitely some feistiness in this. I think at one point they say, like, Joe, shut up, like shut up. Like, I don't know if that's, if Kevin had a lawyer present. It doesn't sound like he did.
He was reacting to, Kevin was asked, you said you did something that's going to change your life. And he said, I do a lot of things.
Yeah. That's something you'll regret later on in his life. And he said, like, I do a lot of things, which is just, non-speak.
But he's kind of taunting him at the same time. Yeah.
Yes. I'm very much looking forward to the next episode. I can't wait to, especially knowing what we know now, what could have been said in that interview. Because Kirk has said multiple times he knows Kevin or Boston, he lies about these things. So what did he say in this interview that, like, we can be like, okay, well, we know for a fact that was a lie, or okay, so he told Kirk and Steve a different story. So I'm looking forward to it. He
did mention Rich Natalia again in that tease.
Yes.
So more about Diana and Richie and all of them.
Yes. It is just getting crazier and crazier. I don't know how. So we're halfway through it now, and it sounds like, because going into last week's episode, I would not have guessed that there would have been 2 more deaths in South Carolina. Who knows what else is being involved, or if there's any more disappearances of people involved in this whole thing. So that about does it for me. Harrison, do you have anything?
I'm all good.
Awesome. Well, the case is presented by Taser. This was the wrap up for episode 4, April and Kevin, and we will talk to you next week for episode 5.